Hello, ladies. In this video, we're going to talk about a few things. The very first thing we're going to talk about is how to keep properly hydrated and the importance of being hydrated. Number two, we're going to get through some of the bad news, how to deal with all our different guilty pleasures that we may have. And then we're also going to talk about the top two hormonal disruptors that I want you guys to be careful with over the next 6 weeks that we're going to be working together. Okay, so let's get started. So the very first thing that I need to say is that, as you can imagine, um, we have a lot of different ladies following this program, and everybody's journey is going to be different to the other person's journey. Okay, so what you need to figure out, and this is why I had asked you guys to fill out a diet diary, before session number one. It's because I want you that as we start going through the information on this video, I want you to have a look at your diet diary and try to circle, different, what are you having, what are you drinking, so that you can have a very good idea of exactly where you're at now, and so that way you can try to make proper changes. So for some of you, a lot of the recommendations that I'm giving you, most of them you may already be following, and you may have to tweak a few things here and there. But a lot of you, you may find that everything that I'm asking you to do and everything that I'm asking you to drink may be completely different, than what you're currently doing. And if that's the case, then you need to consider yourself more of a beginner and not so much like an advanced sort of detoxifier. And you want to start trying to make, slow changes. The other thing that I want you guys to kind of consider is what's your personality like. There's some patients that come to see me in my office and they say to me, Dr. Miranda, please don't baby me. Just tell me what I need to do and I'm going to do it. And they're ready, they are ready for me to sit there, and tell them, this is what you need to do. This is how you should be drinking. This is how you should be eating. And they do it, they're ready for the change. They're sick and tired of feeling sick, and they do it. The faster you make the changes, you can go through a bit of a healing crisis, but the faster you're going to start feeling better. Healing crisis meaning you feel worse before you start feeling better. The slower you make the changes, sometimes you have more chances of making the changes and making it last for longer. They're more like longer lasting changes when you're making them slowly. But you may find that the improvements are a little bit slower, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But the main thing is that we're trying to be consistent, long term, and just establishing healthier habits for long term. So I want you to just keep this in mind. Are you the type to want to make changes slowly? Are you ready to just go, all heads on and start making the changes that I'm going to be asking you to make? So so just keep that in mind as we go on with this information. Okay. So let's talk about keeping hydrated. There's absolutely nothing, ladies, that I can do for you or that you can do for yourself if you're not drinking enough water. I have so many patients that come in and their diets are awful, but if they're drinking a lot of water, they are able to keep to a certain level of health, okay? So why is water so important? Because 70% of our body is made out of water, okay? So think about it. If you're eating all these healthy foods, you're taking in all these wonderful nutrients into your body, but if you're not hydrated and if things are not going to be flowing properly, then those nutrients are not getting to the cells where we need them to get to. If you're not drinking enough water, then your body's going to have a harder time picking up those toxins and flowing them out of your body. Okay. So we all should be going to the washroom to urinate at least 4-5 times. I have so many patients that go and pee maybe like twice, during the day. So that's not good. So as you start increasing your water, are you going to have to pee more often? Absolutely. And that's okay. That's your body getting rid of all that extra water. And that's another benefit of drinking lots of water, is that your body gets to a place that says, oh, well, I don't need to retain all this water because I know there's more water coming in. So again, this is a big misconception. A lot of patients think, oh, I don't want to drink any water because I'm already retaining water. The last thing I want is to drink more water. Again, not true. Okay. So you need to drink more water. How much water depends on your weight. Okay. So the best way to calculate the minimum amount of water that you should be drinking is you take your weight in pounds divided by 73.3. Okay. So for example, let me get my good old calculator. If, for example, your weight is 180, and you're going to divide that by 73.3, that would be close to 2.45, so close to 2.5 liters that you should be drinking per day. Okay, so if you're at this point, drinking 1 glass of water and you think about the 2.5 liters and you're like, oh my goodness, I have no idea how I'm going to get there. Again, do it slowly, but at least you need to know what your goal is so that you can be healthy, so that you can flush what you need to flush out so that you can avoid retaining water. That's the amount of water you should be drinking. And of course, you don't want to just sit there, at one time of the day and drink the whole water. You want to be drinking it throughout the whole day at different times. Okay. So what are your options and what is considered water? Because again, there's a lot of misinformation, on this. So of course, you can just keep it simple and just drink water alone. Okay. You can add some lemon or lime juice. I think in the previous video, we talked about starting your day with 2 glasses of water. Okay, so that would be 16 ounces right there. And you can add the lemon or lime if your stomach is okay, if you don't get the heartburn, if you don't get the acid reflux. A lot of people prefer having herbal teas, especially if it's winter, months and it gets cold. You can have herbal teas, of course, with no sugar, no honey. Okay, so just a straight herbal teas. You can add ginger to your water. Some people like the spice, of the ginger. The new thing now is to add mint and chia seeds. There's a picture right there. So I don't know if you've tried this, but this is a really, the chia seeds gives the water a nice flavor, and the mint together with it, or some lemons with it, it just makes it a very nice, enjoyable drink, and that would be part of your water intake as well. Okay, so keeping hydrated, again, I can't emphasize, oops, sorry, ladies, oops, really important. Okay, so let's talk about coffee. Coffee is probably one of the hardest conversations I need to have with all my patients because it's such a big part, of our life. Ideally, during the 6 weeks, if you can, you want to try to avoid coffee. But if that's just an impossibility, if you think to yourself, oh my God, like there's no way I can do this, then at the very, very least, try to stick with just 1 cup of coffee per day after breakfast. So not as soon as you wake up. It should not be how you break your fast. So remember, we're going to be fasting for 12 to 14 hours overnight. That's going to be the longest amount of time that we go without eating anything in our day. So it's really important that what we first put into our body, we make it really, really healthy. So we want to start our day with water and lemon, like we talked about, and then you're going to have a good, nice breakfast with some protein. And then only after that, if needed, then you can go ahead and have your cup of coffee, okay? But with no sugar, okay? So be careful with that. In the next session, we're gonna be talking about, what are different healthy sugar alternatives. But to give you the heads up, you can use monk fruit, you can use stevia, but whatever you do, do not use the sugar, or you can just try to get used to having the coffee black, on its own. Why is coffee so bad for us? Because it affects every single organ in our body. Our heart, our stomach, our nervous system, our brain, our pancreas, that's a big one. So our pancreas, as you guys probably know, that's the organ that secretes the insulin and helps our body to regulate our blood sugar. And the insulin is a hormone that is so important to balance. So if we want to have more success in regulating our blood sugar, then we want to try to eliminate or decrease the coffee to just 1 a day. Caffeine affects anxiety. So if one of your main concerns is just feeling stressed and overwhelmed and agitated and anxious, then know that caffeine can affect that. It can increase your cholesterol. It can increase your blood pressure. It can make your body more acidic. And when we're more acidic and not alkaline, then we can have more diseases, forming like inflammation, congestion, cancer only grows when we're acidic. Okay. And last but not least, it decreases the way we absorb the nutrients from our food, and it increases our body's elimination of key nutrients such as minerals like calcium, magnesium, and B vitamins. Okay, so in short, coffee is not a food item, it's a drug. Okay, and I know it's a big component of our daily lives, I get it. So like I said, if you really can't give up your coffee, then at the very least, try to minimize it to just 1 cup of coffee a day. Follow it by a glass of water to try to flush it out, quicker. Generally, caffeine stays in our body for 35 hours. So for 1 cup of coffee, to get eliminated from your system entirely, it takes 35 hours. So if you're having insomnia, that would be another reason to think about eliminating the coffee. A lot of my patients think that because they're just having the 1 cup of coffee in the morning, that can't possibly affect their sleep at night. Think again. Okay, if you're one of those sensitive people, then even the 1 cup of coffee in the morning can still affect your sleep. And of course, all of this is even worse if you're not drinking enough water. So if you look at your diet diary and you see 2, 3 cups of coffee and not enough water, that's not going to get you balanced. Okay, that is something that I want you to start working on right away, starting this first week. Okay, perfect. So what are the alternatives? The alternatives can just be herbal teas, again with no sugar. You can have green tea. Green tea still has caffeine, but not as much as a regular cup of coffee. Okay, so for example, if a regular cup of coffee has like 100 milligrams of caffeine, a green tea may have 10 or 15. Okay, so it still has some, but not as much. The other option is getting like a Swiss water decaf. So the regular decaf coffee is not a good alternative because in the process of removing the caffeine, they're adding chemicals, to try to remove the caffeine. But this company, Swiss, has found a way to remove most of the caffeine, not 100%, most of the caffeine through just a steaming process. Okay, so it's called Swiss water process. So when you go to the coffee section, check to see the decaf section, but check the one that says Swiss water process. Okay, this is becoming a lot more popular nowadays, and there's a lot more options out there, different companies making the Swiss water decaf. For example, McDonald's decaf is a Swiss water decaf. Tim Hortons decaf is a Swiss water decaf, okay? So that's how far we're coming along, which is great. So if you're out and about and you want to stop for a coffee, then stop for one of these Swiss water decaf options, okay? So yeah, so try those out. And it tastes just like coffee. I think it tastes just like coffee. So you guys can try it and let me know if you agree. Okay, the next conversation we need to talk about is alcohol, okay? So the main reason why we try to avoid alcohol when we're trying to balance our hormones is because alcohol affects our liver. Alcohol gets metabolized in our liver, but so do our hormones. So if we're drinking a lot of alcohol, then our liver is not going to be up to par to be able to detoxify and metabolize all those unwanted hormones that we don't need anymore. Not only hormones, but also other toxins. Alcohol can increase inflammation in your body. Alcohol will affect your nervous system. A lot of people think that alcohol is going to help you fall asleep quicker. In fact, studies are very consistent that alcohol makes you have a lighter sleep. Okay, so if you're having problems sleeping and you're drinking alcohol, you may want to ease up on that. It also affects your blood sugar balance, and it also causes gassiness and bloating, and it can also cause painful bowel movements. Okay, so if these are your symptoms, if you're having a lot of bloating, you're feeling heavy, you're feeling very gassy, your bowel movements are not regular, or you're getting cramps, it could be the alcohol. Okay, and of course, alcohol can be high in calories, right, affecting your weight. So I wrote this down just for you guys to get an idea. So normally, on average, everybody should be eating. And again, this all depends on your BMI and your body type. The number of calories that you should be eating per day. But on average, for women, it's usually about 1,200, 1,300, more or less. So look at that. Let's say you decide to have a martini. That's 295 calories. So you might as well just skip a meal, if you're going to have a martini. So just not worth it. Okay. Okay, so what are the recommendations? Um, if you are going to drink alcohol, for women, I'm not talking for women, ideally you want to drink no more than one drink per night and no more than twice a week. Okay. So if during the 6 weeks, if alcohol is not a big part, of your daily routines, then during the 6 weeks, if you can just avoid the alcohol until your body starts improving and getting more balanced and you start losing weight, it's better to just avoid it altogether. But in the long term, for like as a maintenance thing, as a main staple, what you should try to do is have no more than one drink per evening and no more than twice a week. And your rule should be, no matter what, is always drink a glass of water after every alcoholic drink. Okay. So that will automatically help you to flush it out. You can still sit there and you can still enjoy your alcoholic drink, but it'll help you to flush it out quicker. And it's going to help you not be tempted, to go for a second, cup. Make sense? Wine generally is considered the one to have less calories, although it still has sugar, so it can still disrupt your blood sugar balance, but it does have less calories than other options. Liquor tends to be the one that causes the least amount of bloating and gassiness because usually a lot of the liquors don't have a yeast in it. Okay. So, so keep that in mind. Now, of course, that's going to depend on what you're mixing it with. So you can choose either diet tonic or a club soda, instead of choosing juices, which can be high in sugar. If you are going to have beer, and I'd be very careful with beer in general, just because it does have the gluten and it has yeast, and that can cause a lot of inflammation and digestive problems. But if you are going to choose a beer, then just choose the light option. Okay, perfect. Carbonated drinks. I don't see in practice a lot of my patients, drinking pop. But anyways, I wanted to include it just to be thorough. Pop is super high in sugar. One glass of pop will have something equivalent like to 12 teaspoons of sugar, plus all the other additives, that it usually has. The diet pop is no better. All those artificial sweeteners, they're actually 200 to 13,000 times sweeter than regular sugar, okay? And that can be linked to higher risks of obesity, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, heart disease. So again, the diet pop is not a better option at all. None of them are. The acids that are added are linked to tooth enamel erosions and kidney disease. And of course, it has a whole bunch of colorings and artificial flavors and preservatives. And remember, we talked about trying to keep our food as whole as possible. Now, if you are craving for that carbonation, then you are okay to have like a mineral or a sparkling water, about 1 glass per day. And this is not part of your water intake. So this would just be like a treat. You can add some lemons, some lime, some mint, to it for flavor. Avoid, using juices, per se. But yeah, this is okay to have one per day, and that's not going to affect your hormones. That's not going to affect our journey, into getting you balanced. But again, don't count that as your water intake. Okay, perfect. Salt, we don't need to avoid salt entirely. We just want to avoid having too much salt. So salt, as you probably know, the main reasons to avoid salt is because it makes us retain water. So if you have problems such as bloating or water retention or high blood pressure, then that's when you want to be extra careful with the salt. Generally speaking, the rule of thumb is you're okay to cook with a little bit of salt, but once the meal is in front of you, you want to avoid adding extra salt, to your food. Make sense? The healthier alternatives, of course, you can use any form of herbal spices, so you can use the mint or the chili or the thyme or the cumin. I love cumin. Ginger, sage, parsley, any one of those are fine. You can use as much as you want. For salt per se, the Himalayan salt or the Celtic sea salt, those are healthier options because they have more different minerals. So it's not just the sodium, in it. It still has sodium, so don't be fooled. It still has the sodium. If you have too much of the Celtic sea salt or Himalayan salt, you will still retain water. It can still affect your blood pressure. So I'm not saying just because you're choosing these options that you can have as much as you'd like. I'm not saying that at all, but they are better options because they don't only have the sodium, but they do have, it's a more complete form of multi-mineral, in it. Okay, so keep that in mind. Hopefully you're already using these type of salts. Okay, so now that takes us to our last section of this video, which is avoiding the biggest hormonal disruptors. So can you guys guess which one is the first one? You probably can. Gluten. Gluten is by far the main hormonal disruptor. Okay. I've seen patients, believe it or not, that come to see me with hot flashes, and just by eliminating gluten, their hot flashes go away. Okay, so that's how much of an impact gluten can have. So first of all, just for those of you who don't know what I mean by gluten, gluten is the protein that is present in some of the grains, such as these grains, such as wheat, rye. I'm going to talk about oats at the end, spelt, kamut, barley, couscous, and semolina. It's a protein that can be very hard to digest, causes a lot of bloating, a lot of gassiness, changes in your bowel movement, so constipation or diarrhea. It's gluten is even gassier than legumes. You know how a lot of people talk about beans. I can't eat beans because it makes me so gassy. Well, guess what? The gluten is even worse. Okay. So the more you stay away from these options, the better it is. Oats usually they have the gluten as well because of cross-contamination. Not as much as the other grains. The worst one from this list is the wheat. Okay. So a lot of patients, they're okay still having some oats, as long as you're staying away from all the other gluten grains. But if you do have a lot of problems with bloating and digestive tract problems, just choose the gluten-free oats. That's a very popular option now. You can easily find it in any health food store. So that's an option. But if you're currently eating oats, and you feel good with it, and excuse me, and you don't really have a lot of bloating and gassiness, then you can still go ahead and have it, okay? Oh, oops, sorry. Okay, so what are other gluten-free options that are okay to have? Rice is gluten-free, and that's okay to have. Quinoa. Corn is gluten-free, however, that can be highly genetically modified, so it's not something that I recommend people to have too much of. Millet, buckwheat, and amaranth. If you are going to eat bread, then having Ezekiel bread, which is a sprouted bread, is probably your best option. That one is not completely gluten-free, but it has about 40 to 50% less gluten than a regular bread, okay? So that would be my recommendation. This is a frozen bread that you can find in your bigger grocery stores or in health food stores. The other option for bread would be sourdough bread. Sourdough bread, because it's been fermented, it also loses about 40% of the gluten in it. So that would also be a better option. Okay. So if you need to eat bread, then it's better to just stay away from bread, by the way. But if you do want a slice here and there, then Ezekiel bread or sourdough bread. Okay. And then for the other grains would be more the rice. The rice should be either the brown rice or the wild rice or the basmati rice. Quinoa, millet, buckwheat, or amaranth. Okay, so keep those in mind. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is dairy. Dairy can also be extremely inflammatory and very mucus forming. Okay, so especially if you have a lot of the digestive tract problems like bloating and gasiness, or a lot of mucus formation, like if you have sinus congestion or postnasal drip, or if your ears tend to get congested, or if you have the history of asthma, then all of those are even bigger reasons to avoid the dairy. Now, with the dairy, I do find some patients are okay having small amounts of dairy, okay? For example, you may be okay still having twice a week some goat's cheese or some sheep cheese, okay? Now, a common question that I get asked is lactose-free milk okay? And the answer to that is no, because most of the time, yes, most of the time people can have the lactose, which is the sugar from the milk, but a lot of the times people can have the casein, which is the protein from the milk, which is the one that causes all the problems usually, okay? Goat and sheep still has some casein, but not as much. So if we're only going to be enjoying our cheese about twice a week, more or less, then choosing more the goat's cheese or the sheep cheese, which is easy to find now in different grocery stores, those would be better options. Of course, if you're going to have milk, then it's so much easier now, especially nowadays, there's so many substitutes and options. You can have the unsweetened almond milk or coconut milk or cashew milk or the hemp milk, any one of those dairy milk alternatives, okay? Okay, perfect. So before I end this video, I just wanted to, first of all, remind you that you don't need to follow every single instruction that I'm giving you 100%. If your current diet and lifestyle is very different to what I'm asking you to do right now, then there's nothing wrong with making slow changes, just as long as you are making. So don't be afraid of challenging yourself a little bit, you know, so make sure you are making some changes. But if you're still eating very differently to what I'm asking you to eat, then there's nothing wrong with making these changes gradually, okay? But if you're ready, if you're the type to be all or nothing, then this is ideally the way I'm asking you to eat. And yes, you may go through a bit of a healing crisis, which means you feel worse before you start feeling better, but then chances are you're going to start feeling better sooner than later. Again, if you have any questions, my email is info@mynaturalclinic.com. Okay, thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.